I am here with Jenny Bowker, who is probably one of the most famous quilters down here. And Jenny, you live in
Cairo,
Egypt, but you're Australian.
I'm Australian. My husband's the Australian ambassador in Egypt.
So, I got to see Jenny's passport. You got to just take a look at this passport. This passport is fully stamped.
How many countries? 3 empty pages.
Oh, 3 whole empty
good
pages.
For a month.
How many countries have you been to in the last year?
Oh, maybe 15 in the last year. There was 1 year I went to 22.
22 countries in 1 year.
Worst.
Incredible. And you're passing quilting on everywhere you go, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your book here.
Okay, I brought this along because I'd taken a funny little kaleidoscope to Gove Peninsula and started looking at pictures of images of lipstick palms through it, and loved the way they shattered and crystallised, and was thinking about how on earth you get that into a quilt. So I took photos. This is actually the bit I used. I cut a little hole in a tiny bit of paper and moved it round to find bits that looked interesting.
Oh, what a great
And drew
tool.
them. In fact, I drew them on that page because at that stage these weren't stuck. And started blowing them up, making bigger images. Made half a dozen different blocks and 6 this way, 6 that way.
Oh,
And the
fascinating.
documentation's here, which is boring as boring, but started to put them up. These didn't work in the image, and they didn't work under the image either, so they came out and were discarded. There's the discarded blocks. This one only got as far as one piece, and it was obviously a mess.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. And this has turned into a quilt. What's the name of the quilt?
This has turned into a quilt called Lipstick Palm.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely gorgeous. That's a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
Now, where are some of the most? Where have you taught? Countries.
Well, not a lot in the States, but I've taught in Iran, in Ramallah, in Palestine, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Bangkok, India, all over, mostly Middle East.
Middle East, yeah.
And Australia and New Zealand, of course.
Yeah. Now, you were telling me the other night about some women that you taught for a month.
There's 2 groups. I taught one group in Iran for a month and one group in Ramallah for a month. Ramallah I did for free. They're very poor, and it was all poor women who needed to earn an income for various reasons. 3 different groups, 12 to a group, 36 women to teach each day, and 3 classes a day. And I had them for a month, but I had to get them to teacher level. They had no other resources, and they were going off to teach patchwork all around the country. And they had no tradition of patchwork. So I realised about 3 weeks before I went that I couldn't walk in and teach Road to Oklahoma and Ohio Star and some of the traditional beginner blocks when these women didn't much like the States. So I had this quandary, and I pulled out a whole lot of Palestinian patterning in old dresses that I own and analysed embroidery and then turned those into quilt blocks, which I taught back to them.
Fantastic.
It was interesting work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you were able to touch their lives and translate patchwork into theirs.
I slid it under their culture instead of coming in on top with something different.
Right.
And I did the same in Iran. In Iran we used all Islamic style patterning.
Yes. Now your quilts are very diverse, I noticed. I was looking on your website, and you do a bit of traditional. Lost in Singapore is a beautiful piece, and your serge piece, very traditional in flavor. And then you also do realistic-looking designs, so it looks like a vessel, your piece that's called Vessel. And then Hearthstones is just beautiful. It looks like the moon reflecting off the water there.
Yeah.
And it's really neat because then you combine those two, reality with patchwork blocks.
I like using patchwork to pull out into a landscape. It does 2 things. When you look at the quilts at first, you see landscape, and then you think, no, it's patchwork, and it pulls you back and forth. It's very hard to see both at once, and you swing back and forth between the 2 images. And I like it because it uses elements of very traditional patchwork, but in a way which is highly creative.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to attract the students I want to teach. I don't really like teaching just a quilt for a day. I like taking people who have traditional skills but who want to move into original work and don't quite know how to do it.
Right.
And having traditional elements is that little bit intriguing because people look at my work and think, well, I can do that part, I just need to know how to do that.
Right, and it just pulls them in
gentle
nice and
step.
slow.
Gentle step, yes.
And then the other facet of your work is that you have some really wonderful abstract pieces. So
yeah,
it's really
I did a visual arts degree at the Australian National University for 4 years, went back at 45, and it's one of these things that you do when you realise that a life in science does not work when your husband's a diplomat and you're going to live in places like Syria and Jordan. So the visual arts led into the abstract thinking in many ways.
Right.
So even my traditional stuff has a lot of thought beneath it.
Absolutely. Oh, that is fascinating. And you also have a blog, which I think probably Jenny's most famous for her blog, because she had about 600 people in her lecture last night because they had read her blog. And your blog, what does your blog talk about?
It's just my life in Cairo. It's day-to-day funny little incidents that happen around me in Cairo. Yeah. And it's just day-to-day life. But because my life's different for Australians and New Zealanders anyway, it makes nice reading, I guess.
Yeah, that's fun reading. So you'll have to go take a look at her blog site. Tell me what your life philosophy is.
Life philosophy. Okay, life philosophy. Never walk past an open door.
Oh, that is
How's that?
deep. That is wonderful.
Yeah. This one's a carpenter's wheel quilt, which I made for the trip to Iran because it was a nicely Islamic style of pattern, and it's my quick and simple quilt idea for when I need to make something in a real hurry that doesn't need to take too long. So I can make a top for this in the morning. It's all half square triangles, and I teach a simple way to make them. But the quilting is elaborate. Superior Threads had given me some beautiful thread and I just covered it. So I love The Edge of the Trees because it's a piece by Rhys Jones and it's about cultural differences, and with my life and travelling into different cultures all the time, this is something that means a lot to me. The piece of text that he wrote talks about the discoverers coming in through the surf, and behind them at the edge of the trees were the Aborigines watching them. It's about white Australians first coming to settle in Australia, and it says that the discoverers coming through the surf saw Australia as alien and hostile and threatening, and those behind the edge of the trees saw it only as the place they loved, dear and familiar, and the origin of their dreams. And I love it. You have no idea what's going on in your neighbour's house. Everyone has their own norm, and that's what this is all about. Yeah, these are banyan roots in Townsville, and I love the way they formed a filter between the land and the sea. So in the backgrounds, it looks abstract, but it's a really simple tracing of a photograph. And you have the 3 times of day, dawn with the sky gold and the sea purple and the sand gold. Middle of the day, blue sky, blue sea, and I've made the banyans in just those same colours but brought them forward and brighter. And the last one, I've used the colours of the sky and sea in the first one for the banyan roots, and it was a wet day, so the sky's grey and the sea's green. Very simple. This is called Lost in Singapore. I'd gone with a friend to Singapore, once again on a military trip with my husband, and we'd asked a taxi to take us out to a place we'd heard about, which was a craft village. He happily took us. It was miles. We went out through kampong after kampong, these little villages, and he left us at the entrance, and we said, but it looks closed. And he said, no, go in. And we did, and it was closed. So we actually had to walk miles back. There was no sign of a taxi. And we went to a little kampong and bought 4 or 5 batik sarongs, which we split between us, laid them out in the hotel room, had cut off each decorative panel and took turns to choose them, split the rest of the fabric and challenged each other. So this is my challenge, but I love working with colours of other cultures because they use colour differently. And I thought this was a really interesting way to use sarong pieces. It's a pattern that let me use big panels of big pieces.
Jenny, thank you so much for sharing the stories of these quilts. We've gotten to see some of Jenny's quilts and heard her fascinating life and where she's been and how she's touched people's lives. Jenny, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And I thank you so much for joining me this month, and I hope you'll come back next month and see what I have for you then. Thanks for being with me.